Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to another ecosystem session. It's Friday, the 26th of March, and we have Eric Harris Braun. You may know. Um, Eric, it's great to have you here today.
It's really fun to be here. I'm excited to get to be in this part of the whole world of Holo and Holochain with you.
Yeah, I was really excited to have you. So can tell us a little bit of the story. Well, Eric's here because he was just taking a little bit of time off. I think it was either a weekend or a holiday or something like that. And
Yep.
he just started coding. So,
All right. Well, so yeah, it was Christmas break, and I had I had I had this inspiration of this thing that I wanted to be able to do, and I sat down with Arthur and worked out a protocol, and I call it SYN, SYN, and if that the reason I call it that is that the that's the prefix for words like synthesis and symbiosis. It's the prefix from the Greek, which means with or together. And what I wanted to be able to do is create a Holochain DNA that would be a general purpose DNA for doing real-time applications like Google Docs, or if you've used HackMD or you've used Miro, when people can simultaneously move objects or type at the same time. Because frankly, there's no app I'll ever use anymore that isn't collaborative for the most part,
yep.
right? Like, do I use Word or Excel? No, I use Google Docs and Google Spreadsheet or HackMD. And so there's a part of me that realized that it just makes no sense to have an application that doesn't have that real-time ability to update and work together with people, because we're pretty much always working together with people.
Yep.
And so I wanted to figure out what's the protocol and between the user interfaces to be able to do that kind of updating, and what do we need to have underneath in Holochain to support that. And so, yeah, I sat down with Art, came up with a protocol. Took us an afternoon to figure out how to do it. And then I spent a week with my son, with Will, and we wrote it was a couple, 2, 3 hours a day, maybe a little bit more. We wrote the code and got a proof of concept. This isn't like Google Docs yet, but a proof of concept that'll work across a bunch of different applications to do that kind of real-time collaboration.
All right. Well, with that teaser, can you now take us back a little while and tell us what got you first thinking about peer-to-peer applications and why they were so important to you?
Well, actually, that's funny. My first foray into peer-to-peer applications was straight out of college. And so what we think of as peer-to-peer applications is not how I was thinking about it then. But if you go to glassbead.com, you will see the first set of peer-to-peer applications that I wrote in this company that I started with my college roommate called Glassbead Software. And the first one we wrote was this thing called Snapmail. And the idea was, well, in fact, actually what's hilarious about it is that the problem that we had was that I would walk to the laser printer in the Apple network, and I would print something out, and I would walk there, and damn it, they had left letterhead, or they had an envelope in the paper tray. And so then I had to go and like take that out, put in a different piece of paper, and come back to my desk and do it again. And so I wanted a little peer-to-peer application that could say, I've put letterhead in the printer, don't use the printer. And so we created an application that would do that, and it would flash over the little Apple icon, a little thing that said, there's letterhead paper in the printer. And
Yep.
so it was peer-to-peer. The idea was that on your Apple network, you could just fire this application up. It would go find the addresses locally on the network, and away it would go. And then we realized, oh, you know what? We can do full email on this stuff, but in the local area network peer-to-peer, where you don't have to install any servers. Because at the time, there was stuff that would do that. This is back in 90 or something like that, 1980, 1991 or 92. And And so there were programs out there that you could do that, but you had to install a central server even on your local area network. And so this whole set of things that we did was decentralized. It would go and use, at the time, there was a protocol called Apple Talk. And they had a really nice protocol for doing peer discovery. And we used that. And then over the years, we built this thing out and had a bunch of other solutions. And it was all peer-to-peer for local area network stuff. So that's how my initial work in this back then, and actually writing the code that would make that work, was the first thing I did out of college.
Super. Okay, so that sounds like really practical.
Yep.
At what point did it start to become a bit more deeply philosophical?
So the deeper philosophical stuff came when I was studying and understanding the nature of the monetary system and understanding how deeply the rules that we operate together with on the economic scale govern the results of what happens to all humans. So it's kind of like this, right? You create this thing, this great little engine with a piston, and you put oil into it, and you can get around, and it's really fantastic, right? You have this thing called an internal combustion engine, but you don't realize that if you scale that pattern out globally, you get global warming because of the CO2 input. There's a different consequence at scale, and the monetary system is similar. When you issue money based on debt, and you put the control into centralized banks, that's fine. You can do that. We do all kinds of, banking was decentralized a lot of ways in this country. They all issued their own notes. They did all kinds of stuff like that. But the scaling out of that pattern has some pretty, what shall we say, large scale systemic effects that don't lead to a thrivable world. That's where it ends up. And so when I was studying how that worked and I was trying to understand what was going on there, and I realized that this was an invention, that our monetary system was an invention and that we could do things differently, then I realized, oh, you could actually do this differently now. You don't have to put the hands, you don't have to put monetary issuance in central banks because we have different tools. Just like there's been all kinds of evolution in human organization where we remove things from the center when other support structures come into place. And I'm not talking about Bitcoin and Ethereum, although that's actually an interesting example. Distributed ledger tech has been somewhat about that, but it's interesting how deeply centralized that is. Anyways, we're not necessarily going to go into that. Does that answer your question now about where it turned philosophical? It turned philosophical. For me, it's less philosophical than it is also practical, because it's about systems theory and how the system responds, and are we happy inside that system? Is that philosophy? Maybe, but it's much more to me about what's real in the world.
Yeah, interesting. And so you decided that you weren't happy inside that system.
Well, I see the consequences of things that I think of as making us all very unhappy. Unequal distribution of wealth, all kinds of dynamics that are about optimizing monetary flow rather than optimizing value flow, and the equating of value and money, which is deeply erroneous. I remember even having a conversation with somebody about what's valuable, and what my friend was saying, well, only things that are scarce are valuable. No, actually, that's a property of the monetary system. It tracks things that are scarce. And so we start to only see those things that are scarce as valuable. But the most valuable things are things that are not scarce. They're sufficient or they're abundant, but we can only track their value inside a scarcity-based system. And so there's all these things that you could call philosophical, but to me, they're deeply, why is it that we pay teachers way less than anybody else? What is going on there? It's not about the actual value of what they do in this country, the US anyways. So it's, again, I'm not quite sure if I'm getting at your question there, but to me, it's deeply practical.
Super. Okay. And then At what point did those two worlds come together? What brought them together? The two practical worlds.
Well, so for me, when I look at this issue, when I look at how deeply entrenched the current system is, I see there's no way you can change the current system, because it creates too much value and too much coherence. And so the only thing you can do is you can create something that would create more social coherence in the current system, right? Because we have a pretty highly coherent system. It's freaking incredible. I mean, yeah, it's weird that you can disrupt it by getting one ship blocked in the Suez Canal, like we're seeing this week. But if you think about it, it's just the coherence about what can be delivered and built in the world is really astonishing, despite its negative side effects. So, but that means that you have to create a system that has more coherence, that doesn't have the negative side effects. And so as I thought about that and have gone as deep as I can go to think about how you do that, well, there's this answer that Arthur and I came to, and we talk about it as this word grammatic capacities. It's like everything that creates coherence is a capacity to embody, to have a grammar for making expressions. Now I'm talking in deep abstractions, making expressions that that are more, that create new possibilities in the world. So the examples, obviously, the example, we can think about language, right? Human language, it didn't exist at one point in time. When it comes into existence, the proto-hominids that could use language have an incredibly richer capacity to coordinate and work together than those that don't have the kind of language. When I say language, the kind of language that we have, subject, predicate, object, grammar. All mammals have different types of languages and can do semantic, and they can talk to each other. They can say all kinds of things. But subject, predicate, object, grammar gives us the capacity to coordinate in entirely new ways, as does double entry bookkeeping, as do things like constitutions, and there are patterns for how to organize together. These are all grammars that enable us to be able to work better together. And so for me, one of the deep things was realizing, oh, we need to create a new grammar to encode different types of value, the kinds of value that aren't just about scarcity. Well, how are we going to do that? The only way we're going to do that is to create really deep underlying structures that allow us to make sentences with each other and transactions with each other in arbitrarily new grammars. And what does that look like? That looks like code. That looks like, I mean, it's fascinating. If you think about Ethereum smart contracts, that's a grammar for creating ways of organizing together. And so when we realized this is when Arthur and I started down a path of this thing that we called Scepter at the time, which is some deep computing structures for creating powerful, basically metagrammars. If creating grammars is the important thing, well, then we need a grammar for creating grammars. And then that comes back down to, okay, what's the computing fabric that you need to be able to hold that thing? And all of that stuff was way too abstracted, way too complicated to tell people about. So instead, we went with just one little part of it, which is what Holochain is. And it's very similar. Like each application that you can create in Holochain is a grammar for how to play together. It's a set of rules that we can all play together with. What does that look like? A distributed peer-to-peer application. So that's the long story of how these two things came back together. That may be too long. You may want me to try it again in a fewer number of sentences.
Hey, well, if you would like that, it's not necessary for me.
Yeah.
And as that has unfolded, how have you noticed that you've changed as you play with other people?
Well, that's really a fascinating question. So I've had to actually incorporate into my awareness, it's almost, I can't really say body awareness because I don't have really that, but it's a deeper experiential awareness, some of the discoveries that we learned intellectually. So in the peer-to-peer world, one of the things you realize is that software systems that run on different computers will have different experiences of reality. This is known in the computing industry as the Byzantine generals problem. And it's very hard. It's a hard problem for a large number of independent agents to agree on a single reality. Like there's some very good math about how hard a problem that is. And so this is the reason why we have centralized systems, and the reason why blockchain exists, because it's a way of solving that problem, albeit at a very high cost. So this is true. It's like a fact of physics that agents, independently acting agents, see the world in different ways. So that's what Holochain was designed to deal with, in a way that faces that truth head on and says, we're not going to force one reality. We're going to create a space in which different rules of the games that people play find different solutions for how to come to alignment inside the context of that reality. Okay, this is all technical stuff. I know it's true from the math. I know it's true from, you go look at gossip storms and all kinds of stuff that happen in data centers. You can go look at, this is just what's real about software systems. But it turns out to be true about human systems too. Like, the people that I work with actually experience a very different reality than my reality. And being able to actually accept that and listen to what happened to them, and not try to force it into what I believed was true about an event, is actually really hard, because especially when it conflicts with my experience of what happened in an event. And believe me, when you start a company, you have conflicting events that happen. People say things that different people interpret in different ways, and it hurts. And inside the pain of that reality, I want it to be my way. But it turns out not to be my way. It turns out that there is a plurality of experience, and being able to actually live inside that plurality while still trying to find ways to work together without mushing it into one real, quote, real reality. That's been a personal challenge for me, to take this technical truth and apply it to my personal experience working with people in here and realizing that it's also true there. I've been challenged by that, and I've had to upgrade that capacity. And you may be out there, if somebody who's watching this is like, but there is some real reality out there. Maybe, maybe not. I don't know about that. It may be true, but it doesn't seem to be the case, or at least, even if there is one, it's not directly attainable by me. And the process of coming into alignment and finding structures that allow that, that's a really important game to play at the human level, just as important as it is to play at the technical level, the computing level. And of course, this is like right smack at the core of why SYN is interesting. SYN being SYN, this code that I've been writing.
Tell me more.
Well, so here's another technical truth. When coders are working on code, they move the code base forward, and then they want to do this thing called version control, where they commit a change to a code base, and another coder is working over there and committing code to the code base, and at the same time. And so there's this whole tool, version control tool Git, that allows that to happen, allows there to be different realities of the code base moving forward, and allows this process called merging to come together. It's fantastic. allowing for the reality in the open source world that people are going to move an open source project forward along different paths. And then if they want to, they can merge them together. Do you see how this is similar to, to what we were just talking about? And so that's what SYN is built to be able to do, to have, to create a space in which the same ability of merging different realities becomes possible for people, in a user interface that's reasonable for not just developing code.
Well,
unfortunately, I don't have that user interface to demonstrate because that's the next step of what to do. But the underpinnings are there, right, inside the code that I've written to do that. But that's why it's exciting to me.
Okay, super. Well, do you want to build on this one and share your screen and show us a little bit of what you've done and build on this a little bit, and then show us what will be possible in the future.
I can do that. So let's see. All right. So I'm going to fire up using my little HC test command, a couple conductors running 2 different DNAs. And then I'm going to switch to, there we go. Here we have 2 instances of syntax. So this is, it's pretty straightforward, right? This isn't going to look all that super exciting, except I'm going to connect here in the first instance, and it'll spin for a little bit. And then you will see my identity show up here. This is my hash.
One sec, Eric. I can still, maybe it's my screen. I can still only see glass bead at the moment.
Oh, you know what? I probably did the wrong one. Let me try sharing.
Sharing a different.
This one? Is that one?
Super. I'm with you now.
Okay, great.
Yep.
Okay, so I have 2 different browser windows open, and on the left here, I connected to one instance. And so you see you have the session ID, and you up on the top right here, you have my identity. And on the second one, I'm going to connect to a second instance. Now they both connected. So this guy's name is BNK0. This guy's name is GCDBL, right? So this is like a Google Docs. This is as if you and I had both opened up 2 different windows with Google Docs. And I'm going to set the title over here. So this is the title of the doc. And you'll see that it just pops right up over here. And in the bottom, you can see the history was transmitted from one side to the other. I can start typing on this side. This is the, hey, look at that. This is the first, it looks like there was a little bit of a contention that was being resolved there. First element? No, it's not really an element. So over here on this window, I'm going to say, let's go and delete that word element. No, sentence. Hey, look at that. It looks like I'm having some problems because it should have been popping up over here. Dang it. Demo gremlins.
Great.
Let me try. Yeah, see, this guy's history was like, nope, I couldn't reconcile the history. So I went back and reconciled the history on the fly there. Well, let's try it again. If I type now here, how about this line? And if I come back in here and put one in here, this is a line in the middle. So this is real-time text editing with, you can see that they're both attached to the same session. And you can see down in the history of each little keystroke that gets sent across and back and forth between the 2 different user interfaces and are being synchronized. So application that's holding this data and is sending the signals back and forth between the user interfaces and then saving the data to the DHT. And I don't know, I mean, we could go into a bunch more of the technical stuff. But that's real-time editing on Holochain. The thing that I want to have happen is that it's hidden inside the session ID. And I can't do this yet. But imagine if I said, okay, this is great, but I need to create a new session. And so in your Google Docs, you might be able to go back in history and see the revision history. but there's only one revision history. If I created a new session from this point, then I could go forward and make a bunch of changes along this line of history. And then that new line of history session would pop up over here. So we could be creating different lines of history in our documentation and editing those. And at some point when we want to, we can merge those things back together for a new revision and move forward. This is like if you're offline, or if you basically said, okay, this was great, I'm going to create a new document, I'm going to go from there. That process of being able to have multiple realities on documents instead of pretending like a document is only one reality, I think is really deeply important. And it may not be so important for Google Docs, where you want there to be only one reality for that particular document, but it's really important for something like Wikipedia, where different people actually have different interpretations of what a given entry is in the Wikipedia. Wikipedia has this fiction of neutral point of view. There's no such freaking thing as neutral point of view. There's lots of different points of view, and it would be fabulous if we could name those points of view and see where they branch from each other and what parts are different. And we could even have points of view that became aligned between two different factions. I think that kind of way of thinking about real-time editing, and also not just real-time editing, but evolving unification of realities is really important in the modern world, in the modern digital world, where we have so many questions about what's real and what's fake.
Yeah. Right. I've just seen, because often when I'm making a Google document, I'll then go back and reference all of where the idea originated from, what it looked like in different forms. And the only way to do that is then go and find each document. Whereas actually now I'm starting to understand that component of it, because actually in this world, they would all just be evolving from this source, and you would be able to then track the evolution of these documents, which in that way, like there's a different, and just because there's what we do with different people and then merge those points of view, but then there's even what we do ourselves and with other people, which is that I'm starting to get the lineage of my activity then.
Yep. All right. So I posted something that some people have seen as an article about why I care about this. And at the bottom, I had a teaser for geeks. And I said it was using that meme, the world if, and the thing that I said is the world if every app had an Emacs undo tree. I want to show you what that's like.
Yep.
To give you a sense, because this has been around for a while. And so let me just do this. Let's see if we can do this on the fly. I didn't play. Okay, so check this out. So here's a text document in Emacs. Can you see it?
Yes, I can.
Okay, so I'm going to say this is the first line. And this is the third line. And I'm like, no. This is the second line. Second line, okay. And let me see. Oh no, so what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna undo. Actually, it is the third line. So I'm gonna undo. I just hit the undo keys to get back there. And I'm gonna say this is the third line, right? So this is how you do stuff in the normal world. You do undo and you go back. But I want to show you what happens if you do this thing in Emacs, which is called, oh, there I did undo again, which is an undo tree. Now, this is a little tree of the changes that I've made that's let me walk the history back to different parts of the history. Can you see how I'm walking up and down the history?
Yep.
Okay, and when I get here, I could actually just start typing again. I am now typing from here. But wait a second, where did my third line go? I want it. So if I go undo, it's gone. I can't get that third line that I typed in. But if I look at the undo tree, I can actually go back and get that from the tree
Yeah.
all the way down here. I can copy and paste it. I can navigate back down my undo tree over to this side, and I can stick that back in the middle where I want it here.
Yeah.
Do you see how it's like the tree of reality, if we keep the history and we allow ourselves to navigate it and use it, that's just me using it for myself.
Yeah.
Right? It's not about me using it. It's not about us together doing that. I want to bring that user interface or the ability to make it just as easy to walk up and down these trees of changes to be things that where multiple people can see where that is and really collaborate easily on the evolution, and then actually be able to tag semantically this branch of a tree, bring other parts of a tree in over here and see how we've been upgrading our changes and why we united two different branches. Yeah, that kind of ability to play with evolving creativity in the social context, real time, feels really important to me. And also like the power of that for us being able to have fun and see things and not be hampered. It's not just about editing text. It's about shifting how we work together and be able to see evolving realities.
So is there something you can show me that brings to life, like how is SYN different from just a Google Doc?
Well, SYN itself isn't different from a Google Doc, but I didn't prepare for this because what SYN is for a framework for creating things like Google Docs. And so, so there's another app, and what I'm going to do for this one is I'm going to do, I'm just going to show you I guess what I'll do is I'll just share on the screen for a second the blog post that I made.
Yep.
Because what it shows what you've already seen, but it shows another app that was built on SYN that took almost no time to build because the infrastructure was there. And so it's nice because you can see the, well, actually, maybe I can do like this, copy image address, and I can just paste it. No, that's too, no, that's good. Here we go. I'll share my screen again. So, okay, so when I talked about this with the current team, we use this thing called idea boards, which is a way of putting stickies up, and it's a real-time application for editing and stickies and coordinating what we're going to talk about. By everybody can vote on the stickies that you want and add new ones and so on. And we was like, why don't we do this in Holochain and have this be around for us to use? And so I am going to show you that. Can you see it?
Yep, sure can.
So this is, it should look very familiar because it's the same basic user interface that's running the shell of the user interface, yep. But you can very simply define what content is and how to make changes to content. And as long as you can define what content is and how to render it and how to make changes to content, then SYN can do all of the interaction with the synchronization.
Yep.
Because it sends this is how you made this change to the other node. And so you can see how we're connecting in this one and adding a new sticky, and it goes just like the other one, like the Google Docs type one. So any application that has a model of showing how to make changes to the state, you can do this. You can put it into that context. This is the proof of that. Make sense?
Yeah, no, it makes complete sense. I'm just thinking, is there a way of showing me, because obviously Google Docs is, I'm working, I have to be online, right? More, and so I'm working basically on, like, how is the application itself working differently to how SYN works? Maybe it's where the application run. Yeah.
Well, I did a little bit of research about how Google Docs works, and they use some very complicated protocols for doing their updating stuff. They've got some pretty hard math behind it, which, because they're actually also trying to do some stuff that's reasonably interesting. And it's actually more complicated than I understand and that I could go into here. But things like Miro and HackMD, which are things that other people know about, they all use a central server. And each one of the user interfaces, and I'm sure, and it's the same thing with idea boards, you talk to a central server, and the central server, when you want to make an update, it sends it to the server. And then the server sends back the update to all the other people who are playing, and it acts as a contention blocker. I mean, a contention resolver. In Sin, we kind of decided to do the same thing, except that the central server is just is whoever created the session. So you saw that little session there. It's like, I'm going to start being the person who's going to coordinate and create the session. And if I go offline, then another person can become the little, it's kind of like, think about it like this. If you have a meeting with a bunch of people, you usually have one person take down the minutes. So this is like the minute taker.
Yep.
And so when I want to make a change to the doc, I send it to the minute taker. The minute taker says, this is what we're doing, sends it out to everybody else. And they're like, okay, cool, that's all right. And in the world of decentralized, real-time collaboration, we are not worried about bad actors. Everybody's a decent actor. And so you can trust somebody to do that. And it makes a total sense. You don't have to put in all kinds of security. You do have to recover from network errors, which is, you can think of it as security problems, because a bad network can mimic any terrible security issue it wants, right? That's part of the Byzantine generals proofs. So you have to do that. You have to be able to recover from those errors, and that's part of what the protocol does. And you actually saw that, like one of the nodes had a networking error, and it recovered from that error, and it recovered from it in a very ungraceful way right now, because part of what's also built into Sin is we don't know what the recovery mechanism will be. There'll be lots of different recovery mechanisms in different contexts.
Yep.
For how to like actually say, oh, I went offline. Do I start a new session? Do I code from here when I come back online? How am I going to merge? That's part of what I want, is to create an ecosystem of solutions to those kinds of merge questions, of which there are many, many, many different appropriate solutions depending on context.
Yep.
So in any case, the standard model is you have your center in your server in the center, and that will handle all the resolution. In the Sin model, there's the dynamic possibility of allowing who's going to be taking that role as the note taker, or the scribe, we call it in the code. Dynamically. And you can do stuff like say, okay, pick the person who's doing the most typing as the scribe, because that gets the best user experience, or pick the person who has the fastest latency, the lowest latency. And there's all kinds of different algorithms that we can choose and experiment and play with, and that I'm excited to get to that stage in this.
Is there anything you would like to leave us with today?
I don't know. I guess for me, the big thing that came out of doing this work was a way of talking about Holochain that feels to me like an upgrade. That Holochain is really collaboration centric. That's what it's for. It's for upgrading our ability to collaborate with each other. We've talked about it as agent centric. And there's some issues there because that makes you really think in terms of individuals and individual rights, and all that kind of stuff is really, really important, because we live in a world that is deeply alienating to agency. And so making sure that we start with empowered agency is crucial. That's a deep underpinning of Holochain, is starting with empowered agency. But the only reason to do that is because you want to play with people. You want to actually collaborate as an empowered agent. And so for me, that's like at the core of this experiment, is upgrading collaborative ability. And it helps me talk about Holochain as collaboration centric. And I like that, because it breaks out of some of the polarization that you see between the worlds of the crypto anarchists, even though, or, you know, and then the folks who are really afraid of this decentralization technology making it possible for everybody to be in the dark web and do all kinds of nasty things. Well, that's not what I'm interested in. I'm interested in truly upgrading our abilities to collaborate with each other in a way that's empowering and that doesn't trade away empowered agency, because that's finally possible. So that's what I would leave you with. Is there anything you'd like to ask me?
Oh, well, would you come back when you've upgraded Sin? Would you come back and show us more?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. We should actually have a full working UI for talking stickies soon, because we actually have a commitment to use it for our next retro. So it's got to get beyond this one. And that means that it'll be an installable app. So people will be able to just download it and play with it if they want. I'm looking forward to that. But then, yeah, absolutely. Especially once we can get some things in around forking sessions and having multiple realities be able to, or multiple version histories show up. I'll be happy to come back and demo that.
That would be really cool. I mean, because with what you've shown, I'm not sure exactly how it will work, but conceivably, as I was just on with Damien last night, he was showing Snapmail. So recording that. But conceivably, you could just say, oh, hang on, well, I want to work on this mail, and a series of people can all jump on and be writing a mail together.
Well, for that, you need to also mix in 𝐬𝐬's compository, right? But absolutely. I mean, especially as we get the patterns for using these little componented DNAs. Yeah, I mean, and so who was it? So if you think about a little document that you would create and you would edit, and then it lives in a DHT, right? Because each document is one DHT.
Yep.
Then at some point you might hit a button, which is like, okay, this is done. And another place can point to that DHT and pull the data from there.
Yep.
And have the record of that and have that cross across a couple of DNA boundaries. We totally want to be able to do that. And then open up the DHT again, start editing it some more, use a reference to that. And what's, I mean, there's just so many great possibilities for doing that kind of stuff and having that stuff be embedded inside the other application, which is the editing phase of the document, not the sending of the document to whoever it needs to go to. Absolutely.
Amazing.
Fun times.
Fun times. Thank you so much for joining.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Super. Yeah, thanks, Eric. So thanks for everyone for watching. It was a total privilege to have the chat and hear some of the story and see Sin in action. So yeah, thank you very, very much. Thank you for all your wonderful work, and look forward to seeing more in the coming months.
It's my pleasure.
All right. Take care, everyone.
Okay.